Hi, friend. Do you ever feel like standard leadership advice just doesn't work for you? Well, welcome to Leadership from Within. In this podcast, we will discover your unique leadership style. We dive into the world of MBTI and the Big Five. We shape leadership strategies that truly fit you. Join us on this journey to find out the one-of-a-kind leader you are. Let's get started. In this episode, I had a fantastic conversation with Gerard, an internationally recognized leader in the nonprofit sector who truly embodies the ENTP leadership style. Gerard opened up about the key elements that shape his authentic leadership. In this discussion, you'll pick up invaluable insights on how to foster group loyalty and lead effectively even when monetary compensation isn't on the table. This is when true leadership skills shine. For those of you steering the ship at a nonprofit or startup, you're in for a treat. This episode is tailored just for you. So, without further ado, let's dive in and get to know Gerard a bit better.
My name is Gerard Dache. I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. My background is I spent about 30 years in the military and in private industry. I was an entrepreneur and started this association in 2017. And since then, the organization's grown to about 120 chapters, 50 working groups, and we've got about 4,500 site users and a community of about 100,000 people around the world. We're at a point where we're recognized by the United Nations for the work that we've done. The UN asked the GBA to basically run their blockchain group. And the members of the Government Blockchain Association are both public and private sector members that work in about 500 different government organizations around the world. And the goal is to help the public and private sector connect, communicate, and collaborate to use emerging technology to solve public sector challenges. So that's a little bit about myself and the organization that I started.
Being perceivers, ENTPs are recognized for their flexibility and a knack for tailoring their approach to fit the current situation. In this opening segment of our chat, you'll notice Gerard's leadership style leans heavily on being adaptive and maintaining an open mindset.
It really depends. So I spent a lot of time in the infantry unit, right? There are times when the bullets are flying, when the bombs are dropping, that's not a time to be collaborative. Right? That's a time when you have to be decisive. There's got to be a strong chain of command. There are other times when that kind of leadership can be terrible. And raising kids is an example. There's a lot of stories about parents who are too strict or too lenient. So I had tremendous lessons that I learned from the military. But it's all about the application. There are times when you should slow down. There are times when you should ask for people's opinion. There's a time when you should encourage open debate and discussion, and even even people that disagree with you. Those are very important. Having an open leadership style in those scenarios is very important, and acting decisively at other times is important. And the wisdom is really knowing when to use each type of leadership style.
Moving on, Gerard opened up about his past and walked me through how he really developed his knack for adaptability from when he was pretty young.
I've had to be innovative, I think, from a very young age. My dad died when I was 16 and my mom had a nervous breakdown. And so I literally had no money. And I had to sort of navigate through life trying to figure out how to deal with change. Because when you go from everything is sort of safe and secure to essentially being orphaned. You just have to figure a lot of things out. And I do believe that I was very fortunate in my younger days, having to deal with a lot of change and crisis and conflict. Having to deal with change built in me the ability to be able to deal with change. So now when things happen, it's easy for me to handle it. I think it's important not to be afraid of change. When something happens, when the torpedo hits the side of the ship, when you get broadsided by something, the very first words out of my mouth is, it's going to be okay. And the reason I say that, I have no idea whether it's going to be okay or not. But the reason I say that is I have to calm my own spirit down so that I can respond to the change of the prices in the best way possible. So it is a decision up front that when you have to deal with change or crisis, you have to decide up front that you're going to be victorious through it, that you're going to make the best moves, because you can only do what you can do. So you might as well do what you can do right, and the things you can't, don't worry about it. But it's critical, I think, to make the decision up front when change or crisis hits you. You have to say, look, it's going to be okay. And then you can calm your spirit down and work through it. So my experiences, I think, have led me to be able to have that capability.
Gerard went on to break it down for us, talking about which parts of leadership you should stay flexible in and which parts you really need to remain steadfast to your core values.
I think that being hard on one subject, right, which is character, right, making a decision. The reason I made the decision that I wasn't going to lie is because early on when I was in a work scenario, I lied about something, and I remember sitting in the president's office, sitting in the chair, and I felt like a worm. And I made the decision at that point, I'm not going to lie. I don't like the way this thing feels. I am not going to do this again. And as a result, it was good. So when it comes to character and integrity, there's no compromise. When it comes to everything else, seek wisdom and don't be afraid to expose your lack of knowledge. I really do think that wisdom comes from many counselors, and but whenever you get people to suggest that you compromise on integrity, just never go there. That's popular. People will say, "Hey, you make a lot more money if you do this or that." Never compromise on integrity, but always be open to criticism and opinion and things like that.
Gerard highlighted the value of integrity and being open to feedback before, so I wanted to dig deeper. I asked him to shed some light on how these traits have actually benefited him in his leadership journey. First off, he broke down for us why making integrity the cornerstone of your leadership is absolutely crucial. And as we get further into the conversation, you'll see Gerard unpack how this foundational quality contributes to a leader's charisma. Charisma has certain qualities that are powerfully attractive and can influence on a grand scale.
The most important thing I think about leadership is, at the end of the day, you make very few decisions in your life, right? I made one decision a long time ago, and that is that I'm going to tell the truth, right? So whenever I'm faced with a situation, I don't have to try to figure out a story, right? The first words out of my mouth are going to be the truth. Now, I'm careful not to be insulting or not to hurt anybody unnecessarily, but I made a decision a long time ago that I was going to be faithful to my wife, right? Period, end of story. So you make decisions like that, and then from that point forward, it's just an issue of managing those decisions, right? So and you know, I'm a much older man now, so it's not an issue. But when I was younger in my career, I didn't put myself in the position where I would violate those core principles. At the end of the day, your organization has to be able to trust you. And if they see that you lie in proposals, if they see that you talk about one person in front of them and you talk differently behind their back, if they see that you're cheating in golf, if they see any of those things, then your foundation's broken, right? And you might succeed temporarily, but you won't succeed long term. So you have to have core values. My number one principle is honesty and integrity. The second is mission and purpose, right? And so we have a mission for our organization, Government Blockchain Association, and a purpose. And that mission and purpose should be easy to articulate. It should be clear, and it should be one that is worth doing. And so if that's true, there will be other people that will share your mission and purpose. And then you set the example for the culture of that organization, right? I recognize that the GBA is it's dependent on my leadership, my culture. I'm not a big shot, but I also recognize how important every interaction is. When I, there was a scene when the planes crashed into the Twin Towers on 9/11, right? There was a scene where the president at the time was at an elementary school, and he was reading stories to kids, like, I don't know, kindergarten or first grade, second graders. And there was a moment when I think it was Andy Card, his chief of staff, came over and whispered in his ear, and he said, "Mr. President, America is under attack." And at that moment, you saw this look on his face, but he also recognized that the whole world was watching. In the back were all the reporters. They were all checking their phones or their Blackberries or whatever. They were all getting the news about what happened. And here's the president of the United States in front of a bunch of small school children, right? And he recognized at that moment that the world was watching him, and how he reacted would impact the entire country's reaction, right? And that's how you have to pursue this concept of leadership, is that your example, right, good, bad, or indifferent, will impact your organization, and it's all important. You can't cut corners, you can't take shortcuts. How you treat people, your sense of mission and value, it's all important. You just can't take that for granted. And there's another saying, that everybody's a leader. It's just some people are leading people in one direction and others are leading them in the other direction. So it's important. People are important. Your mission is important. And when you can stand on that rock, it makes you very powerful, right? When you are, changing your story, when you're trying to remember what you said to this person or that person, when you're afraid of getting caught for something you put in a document, when any of those things happen, it weakens you, and it creates cowards. And so when you stand on telling the truth, it creates courage, it creates people of valor.
People who lean into their thinking abilities often have an easier time handling criticism. In this next segment, we'll dive into the art of using criticism as a tool to enhance your leadership skills. This can be incredibly inspirational, particularly if you are more of a feeling-oriented person.
So there's a process that I use. There's two processes that I use pretty regularly. The first one is about criticism. So if somebody's going to criticize me, and sort of kind of come against me or my position, there's a couple step process. The first thing is I have to be honest, and I have to listen to the criticism to determine if it's true or not. People will always criticize you, and sometimes they don't have all the facts. They don't have the right context. They just don't. They're wrong for whatever reason. And in that case, you just have to let it flow off your back like the water rolling down the back of the duck. But sometimes the criticism is warranted. And so you have to be honest, open enough to listen to determine whether it's true or not true. If the criticism is true, the second thing you have to do is you have to own it, right? You don't try to make excuses. You don't blame anybody else. You have to own it, right? The third thing you have to do is whatever it takes to make it right, you got to make it right. Period, end of story. Whatever it costs you, if you're wrong, you got to make it right. And then the last thing is you got to let it go. You can't hold a grudge. You can't let it eat you up, because people oftentimes are demoralized. They're weakened because they keep beating themselves up over the failures of the past. And look, everybody's going to have failures. There's no way to kind of go through life and not fail. You can't be afraid of it. You just have to realize, okay, I failed, and learn the lesson, do what I can to make it right, and you got to move on. Now, when I'm dealing with conflict amongst other people that doesn't involve myself, right? Then the first thing that's important to do is to establish a framework for the discussion. And you have to recognize that the people you're dealing with more than likely are good people. They're intelligent, right? If they disagree, they have a reason why they disagree. And if they disagree, it's generally because of one of three things. It's either they have different facts, right? Or they connect the dots differently. So they might have fact one and fact two and fact three. They might draw a conclusion from those that are the wrong conclusion. So they connect the dots differently. And three is they have different values. one person might value collective security, the other person might value independence or autonomy, right? Or whatever, pick the domain, the different values. And if you can isolate what the issue is, right? Okay, do we have different facts, right? Are we drawing different conclusions from those facts? And are different things important? And it's not that one value is better or worse than the other, but those different values will cause us to disagree. And recognize it's okay to disagree, right? At the end of the day, if you create a structure and you define in the decision-making process, it's called decision analysis resolution. So the very first step is identify what is the criteria for making the decision, right? Secondly, what are the available options, right? And how do those options evaluate against the criteria? And then the third thing is, based on the evaluation or weight of the different options, you make a decision. So when you have conflict, it's important to understand what's the root cause, what's the source of the conflict, right? Is it different data? Is it different conclusions? Or is it different values, right? To understand what the differences are. And then once you understand the different positions, then you make a decision based on what's the criteria for the decision, what are the options, and what are the analysis of those options against the criteria. And if you can do that, you can and again, treat people with respect, let people finish their sentences, right? Let everybody air their opinions, and that's the way that I deal with conflict.
We've divided our enlightening conversation with Gerard into two main parts. In this first segment, we've explored how Gerard leverages his adaptability in a leadership role. Make sure to tune into the second part of our interview, where Gerard will dive deep into the nuances of fostering successful leadership within large groups, even when monetary compensation isn't on the table. Thanks for being with us today on Leadership from Within. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to empower your leadership journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe and share it with others. And remember, if you have any specific questions about leadership, we're just an email away. See you in the next one.